is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Figured I'd get a video up for you guys the day before the official roster comes out for the New York Giants and give you guys my official prediction of the final 53. Before I show you all that, just realize that this is not going to be the final 53. The New York Giants are going to scour the market. Last year, I think they picked up 3 players off of waivers. They may also trade Darius Slayton. We're going to talk about that in this video as well. So it may be more so like the final 48. And the Giants make a lot of adjustments on this roster. As we know right now, the New York Giants are incredibly thin at a lot of positions on this football team, whether it be on the interior offensive line, the swing tackle position, the cornerback position, the inside linebacker position. The Giants have a lot of holes and a lot of players that I think they're going to be able to grab off of other teams as they cut down to their final 53. So we'll have to wait and see. And, of course, I'll have videos out once the official 53 comes out. Any move that the New York Giants make in terms of player acquisition that they add to the 53-man roster, I'll have a video out as well. So we're going to get busy on the channel as the Giants start to develop their roster. But first, I wanted to touch on the news today that came out about Darius Slayton. I think it was according to Adam Schefter. Let me pull up the exact quote. Yeah, Adam Schefter. This coming out according to his sources. Giants have gotten trade inquiries on wide receiver Darius Slayton per source. One more name to watch in a busy week of moves. This should really surprise nobody. I think we all knew that Darius Slayton stood a very good chance of either being traded or potentially cut by the New York Giants. Not because he is not good enough to make this roster. Anybody that's being completely unbiased, I understand that there's a lot of hatred for Darius Slayton. He's had some key drops. He is a limited receiver in the sense that he is not the most he's not the most expanded route runner. He doesn't have the best of hands. I understand all that. He still provides some speed on the outside that could open up the middle of the field for the New York Giants. And if I'm being completely honest, do I think he's a better wide receiver than Alec Bachman or David Sills? Yeah, I do. But at the same time, he's due to make $2.6 million. Now, if the Giants were to cut him or trade him, they wouldn't really save the $2.6 million in terms of savings because you would then have to replace him with a guy like Sills. Sills probably wouldn't even go up against the top 51. But somebody that is below that would replace him. It would probably in the end save about $1.8 million. But the New York Giants may view it that they could spend that $1.8 million better elsewhere. And if they could get anything for Darius Slayton and they don't view him as a part of this team this year due to his salary, they should go ahead and do that. And you may hate hearing that as a New York Giants fan, and I completely understand because I was of this mindset 2 or 3 months ago that the Giants are very thin in their wide receiving core when you factor in all the players that could potentially go down with injuries. We all know that Kadarius Toney, that Kenny Golladay, that Sterling Shepard all have a lot of injury problems. But at the end of the day, when you look around the NFL, tell me a team that pays $2.6 million to their number 5 wide receiver. And if you could find a team, then tell me a team that is in as bad of a cap situation that the New York Giants are, that have as many holes around their roster that they do at more important positions, that they could potentially get starters or at least guys that could provide very valuable depth at those positions. It makes sense to trade Slayton if a deal is there. And I would not be shocked, as I've said now, as the rosters have started, as it's gotten closer to cut down day, if Darius Slayton is just cut altogether. So if the Giants could get something for him, they absolutely should. Now, what would they get for him? I don't know. Would it be a player-for-player swap? If it was, you would think, like I said, they would try to lean towards maybe bringing in a cornerback, an offensive lineman, a linebacker, so on and so forth, a need somewhere else where they feel like they need a lot of depth. Of course, we've had a lot of injuries on this team at a lot of spots where we were incredibly thin to begin with. So by getting rid of Slayton, I fully understand that it makes our wide receiving core probably slightly weaker. But I think the Giants say we'll take a slight hit there. We believe in Sills enough to be the wide receiver 5 or 6 on this team that could come in if we have a couple of injuries. And we really need to buff up the offensive line or the linebacker. And in the end, if they do trade Darius Slayton or if they do cut Darius Slayton, I think that is the ultimate reason. It's not because Darius Slayton is not good enough to be on the 53-man roster for the New York Giants. It's because there's an economic reason. That at the end of the day, that is the main reason why I don't think Darius Slayton will make the final 53 for the New York Giants. Now, he may originally be announced to be on the 53-man roster. That does not mean that he's going to remain on the 53-man roster after the fact if they could find a trade partner for him. So even if he is announced on the 53-man roster, don't be shocked to see if Darius Slayton is ultimately traded by the New York Giants. But it'll be really interesting to see what happens there, what the New York Giants ultimately get. We all remember last year the Giants made a small trade. I think it was with Ryan Santoso where they got a conditional draft pick. I would hope and expect it to be more than that. We didn't end up even getting anything for that because Santoso didn't play it down for the Carolina Panthers. You would think Darius Slayton could be a number 4, number 5 wide receiver for a team out there looking to compete this season. The other thing is, if you cut him, you run the risk of him potentially signing on with the Dallas Cowboys and looking like complete fools. So if the Giants could trade him, they absolutely should. And hopefully they can. Hopefully they can get something for him. But now I want to jump into the 53-man roster, give you guys my prediction. Again, it's just a prediction. There is no way I'm going to get this completely right. And also factor in that 4 or 5 of these guys, and I'll kind of talk about it as I'm going over the roster, probably are going to be replaced from players on other football teams. But let's jump into it. First, we're going to go over the guys that have already been announced that they have been cut. So then I think it was 80 leading into this. So now it's down to what? 79, 78, 77, 76, 75. 73 players when you factor in the this bunch, because I think they had cut it down to 80. Ryan Santoso, of course, was expected. Santoso was the kicker we brought in due to the fact that Graham Cano suffered a concussion, so no surprise there. Yusuf Corker was an undrafted free agent that many felt, myself included, before training camp started, could ultimately make this roster. Didn't pan out. Elijah Griffin. Travis Toyovan, if you were watching my live stream, he was the wide receiver that I said I had no idea who he was. Keelan Doss, who has the same number as Kayvon Thibodeau, number 5, didn't ultimately end up making this team. Josh Rivas, who we brought in, I believe, was an undrafted free agent as well, and Eric Smith. None of them made the roster. So that knocks it down, I think, to 73. And now I'm going to give you guys my projected final 53, and I'll explain my reasoning for each individual player, some quicker than others. But let's jump into the roster. Let's jump into my official prediction for the New York Giants. If you would ask me like 2 months ago, do I think the Giants are going to go with 3 quarterbacks? I would have told you no. Now, it's not uncommon. I think I remember doing a video on this like 2 years ago when the Giants did go with 3 quarterbacks, and it was about half and half in terms of teams in the league that go with 2 or go with 3. I think due to the play of Davis Webb, due to the fact that Davis Webb is very familiar in this offense, of course, played with Buffalo, and the fact that the New York Giants seem to really respect him. You've heard rumors that he may eventually be a part of this coaching staff. So you have to think that they see some value in that in the quarterback room. And the way that Davis Webb has played in the preseason, I think he's earned a spot on this roster. I don't think he's upending Tyrod Taylor to be the number 2. And of course, Daniel Jones is going to be the number 1. But I have the New York Giants going with 3 quarterbacks. Some people may disagree with that. Some people may want to go with 2. And I completely understand that line of reasoning. Running back, it was tough for me, and I could completely see people siding with Corbin, and I definitely could see the New York Giants rostering Corbin. I don't see more than 4 running backs making this team. I know Breed has been a name that a lot of people have brought about that could potentially be a surprise cut due to the fact he's not played a ton. He's been hurt throughout the preseason. In the end, I think they like Breida. Breida played with them in Buffalo. I do think he's a valuable piece off the bench that can be used in sub packages. Good receiver, explosive playmaker at the running back position. I still think he makes the team. Of course, Saquon Barkley is going to be at the top. Antonio Williams, the Giants brought along very early in the process. Again, ties to Buffalo. Has looked good when given opportunities in the preseason games. So I do think he'll make this team. And then that final spot for me comes down to Gary Brightwell or Corbin. Brightwell, of course, was drafted by the Giants, not by Shane, so there's no ties there. But for me, it comes down to when you're talking about a running back 4, what else can they add to this football team? A major reason why Brightwell was drafted to begin with was because of his special teams prowess. We've seen that the New York Giants have struggled in punt coverage early on in the preseason, so I could see value in bringing a guy like Gary Brightwell back. He's also looked relatively well, albeit against 3rd and 4th stringers in the preseason. I like Corbin more, personally. I think he can be used more in a more versatile way, probably has a little bit more upside than a guy like Gary Brightwell, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if Corbin makes this team, but that's why I chose Brightwell. Tight end, I went with 3. Expect the New York Giants to add a tight end. Tanner Hudson may not make this team, but I have to pick 3 for now. I do think they're going to scour the market and potentially either try to trade for a tight end if they trade Darius Slayton, or potentially sign a tight end that is cut off another team's roster. But right now I went with 3. Daniel Bellinger, obvious, the rookie, is going to be the number 1 tight end going into the year. Ricky Seals-Jones is out for the year. Chris Myrick, who of course played a little bit last year for the New York Giants, caught the touchdown against the Eagles. And Tanner Hudson, who is a veteran cornerback, who the New York, not a veteran, but he's been in the league for a bit, that the New York Giants brought in during training camp. So those are the 3 I'm going to go with. Maybe it'll be somebody else, but those are the three I'm going to go with. And I am not sold that Tanner Hudson's going to make the final 53 once we go out there and look to potentially acquire some other players. But on the roster presently, I have him making the team. Wide receiver, Kenny Golladay. A lot of people on Twitter are talking about the potential to cut Kenny Golladay. It's not happening. Get it out of your head. I understand that fans get disgusted with his lack of effort at times. And there was a big debate on the blocking play, and a lot of people made a lot of good points in the sense that it wasn't really his fault on that play. But, of course, we've seen other clips of him, not putting forth the best of effort in terms of his route running ability. And the fans are going to ride Kenny Golladay all year due to the fact that he made $72 million over a 4-year contract. Last year didn't produce a touchdown. And if he doesn't produce this year, people are going to ride him. It comes down to effort. It comes down to execution. But there's no way they're going to cut him. It costs more to cut him than to keep him. Kenny Golladay is absolutely going to be a part of this roster. Kadarius Toney, of course, will be back with the football team. Wan'Dale Robinson, second-round pick, of course. Sterling Shepard, he's making the team. Looks like he's going to make the initial 53. Won't be put on the PUP or the IR to start the year. So I see him making the team. And then it comes down to a couple of guys in the back end, and that being guys like C.J. Board, guys like David Sills, guys like Richie James, and guys like Alec Bachman. And I could easily see C.J. Board making this team. I could definitely even see the New York Giants going with 7, which would open up the possibility to bring in a guy like Bachman. But when I look at the wide receivers on this roster, I see Shepard works the slot. I see Wan'Dale Robinson works the slot. I see Kadarius Toney works the slot. I even see Richie James, if he's going to make this team, could kind of work the slot. So I don't really see a spot for Bachman personally. And I know a lot of people are rooting for him, and he looked really good in the preseason. And if we go with 7 wide receivers, maybe he does indeed make the team. Richie James' spot comes down to probably either CJ Board or James. One of them is going to be the kick returner. I went with James. I personally think he has a little bit more upside than a guy like CJ Board, but I wouldn't even be surprised if both of them made this team ultimately, or if Board made it instead of Richie James. And I went with David Sills. I mean, you heard Dable come out a couple of weeks ago and praise David Sills. He also praised Colin Johnson, who unfortunately is out for the year with the injury that he sustained. But he praised David Sills, basically hinted at that he's going to make the team, may even get valuable reps in the regular season. And he's kind of the lone receiver in this group that could replace the role of a guy like Kenny Golladay on the outside. And he would essentially, if we trade Darius Slayton or cut Darius Slayton, replace Darius Slayton in the lineup. And, of course, it's entirely possible. Should have mentioned that Darius Slayton could make this roster. And I do think he's one of the top 6 wide receivers on this roster currently. But due to the factors that I talked about before we went over the roster breakdown, I think ultimately he will not be a part of this roster. Offensive line, again, I expect changes to this. I don't think this is going to be the 9 we start the season with. I expect it'll have at least one addition, but I got to go with the guys we got right now. Andrew Thomas, Mark Lewinsky, John Feliciano, Shane Lemieux, Evan Neal, pretty obvious. Lemieux's banged up. Not sure if maybe they'll start him on the IR, but as of now, I don't think he's on it. I do obviously think he'll make this team. Got some exposure at the guard and the center position throughout training camp. Devery Hamilton is actually played pretty well for the New York Giants when given the opportunity. He's played some tackle. He can play some guard. And I do think he's going to make the team. Josh Azudu, of course, the 3rd-round rookie out of North Carolina. Ben Bredesen, I think he'll make the team at least to start. And Max Garcia, the veteran guard that we picked up. That's what I got. We'll see who ultimately are the selections for the New York Giants. But again, I could see Garcia, I could see Bredesen getting replaced from other linemen that we either trade or look to acquire after cutdowns. Defensive line, this is tough for me. And I think it's Jihad Ward or Justin Ellis. I can't remember which is which. I've seen one of them being listed as a linebacker. I went with 5. Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams are obvious. Justin Ellis, Jihad Ward, and DJ Davidson. Ellis and Ward both have ties to Wink. Ellis is more of a nose tackle, I believe. Sometimes I get the 2 players confused, but I think Justin Ellis is a 350-pound nose tackle. I expect him to make the team. DJ Davidson, I've seen some people leaving them off their projected 53-man rosters. The Giants drafted him. If you go back and look at Buffalo's history, I think Will Shane was there. Granted, he wasn't the GM. They never had a rookie, I believe. I could be wrong on this. That did not make the initial 53 after they were drafted. So I do think DJ Davidson will make this team, being that he was a 5th-round pick. But we'll see. Linebacker and offensive linebacker, kind of just combine them. When I say linebacker, I mean inside linebacker. Azeez Ojulari, Kayvon Thibodeau, O'Shane Ximines. Some people may disagree with that, but O'Shane Ximines, as much as we may not want to admit it, did have a very good preseason. He has not produced much at the NFL level when given the opportunity, but I do think it looks as if he's pretty high in the depth chart. Ellerson Smith, I have making the team. He hasn't done much. I think he's been banged up throughout training camp. Quincy Roche, he's definitely on the bubble. Wouldn't be shocked at all if he misses this team. I have him just making the team. Blake Martinez, Tate Crowder, Micah McFadden, of course, the rookie middle linebacker that we drafted, Cam Brown, and Austin Calitro. I rewarded Calitro with my projection. Again, easily a guy that I could see being knocked off of this if we go out there and add somebody else, but he's a guy I'll be rooting for. Carter Coughlin, I didn't have making the team, but easily could make it over a guy like Cam Brown or Calitro. That's kind of what you're looking at for the back end of this linebacking core. Cornerback and safety, Adore Jackson, Aaron Robinson, Rodarius Williams, who may start the year on the IR from what I've read. I'm going to put him here for now. Darnay Holmes and Cordell Flott. I think those five are pretty obvious at the cornerback position. McKinney, Love, Belton, Trenton Thompson, and Harrison Hand's actually a cornerback. Should have put him with the first grouping, who's a veteran cornerback that we brought in. Again, a guy I could easily see being replaced after we make a couple of moves. So I look at the positional groups. I look at cornerback as a spot we can add. I look at middle linebacker as a spot we can add. I look at the offensive line as a spot we can add, and I look at the tight end. I think those are the four position groups I'm looking at. And if they add a couple of guys there, yeah, expect guys like Hand or Calitro or Max Garcia or Tanner Hudson to potentially be replaced with this 53-man roster. Special teams, of course, Graham Gano, Jamie Gillen, and Casey Kreider, the long snapper. That's how I see it. That's my official 53-man roster prediction. So when I get 4 or 5 wrong tomorrow, you guys can go crazy and say I'm an idiot. But I'm looking forward to seeing what the official 53-man roster is. May go live tomorrow to talk about it with you guys. If not, I'll definitely have a video out, and I will have individual videos out about players that the New York Giants acquire throughout the process as we get the real official 53-man roster. But the majority of the players will be on that list. Looking forward to seeing what Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll ultimately decide and seeing how this Darius Slayton thing plays out. I personally, knowing that he probably will not be a part of this team for the foreseeable future, would prefer the Giants to trade him if there was something there. The question is, will it be a player-for-player trade, or will it be a late-round pick, like a 5th, 6th, 7th-round draft pick, if they're able to make a trade? But it seems like, at least according to Schefter, there is interest from around the league. The question is, which teams is it? As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.